in Wisconsin currently. I was just exchanging emails with my colleague in Wausau. There is going to be a meeting in Wisconsin Rapids next week about folks voicing concerns about a data center project there. Charlie Barron's will be there, we're told. So lots of lots of talk on this. Lots of people have thoughts. Uh, let's talk a little bit about the findings. Now, this was a nationwide poll, but clearly reflecting, I think, what people are thinking in Wisconsin as well.
No, the national polling is very close to Wisconsin polling. We did a lot of questions about data centers here in Wisconsin back in February and some more in March. And then the national polling in both January and in April. And the numbers are very similar, whether it's the state or the national, and the concerns are very similar. Um, what we're finding here in Wisconsin in the March poll was 69% thought the costs of data centers outweighed their benefits, and 30% said that the benefits outweighed the costs. So more than a 2-to-1 opposition to data centers or skepticism about data centers. And in our February polling, we asked people which are of this list of 5 potential benefits are the most important benefits? And on a different list, which of these 5 potential costs are the most important costs? And what we found with benefits was um, number one was permanent jobs and spinoff jobs. Um, and number two was revenue to local areas. On the cost side, number one was water usage. And number two was opposition to developing artificial intelligence. Electricity costs, which is often mentioned, actually only ranked number three out of that list of most important concerns. But the broad opposition to artificial intelligence is something that turned up in our Wisconsin polling and in this most recent national polling, where we see a lot of skepticism about AI, even among people who use AI on at least a monthly basis.
Interesting. I think also, and I don't know if this was one of the points that was covered in the poll, but there's also a lot of concern about taking agricultural land out of production.
Yes. We did not see so much of that. One of our potential costs was converting agricultural land into industrial facilities, and that ranked bottom of the 5 potential costs that we asked about. Now, we didn't follow up any more about that, but it wasn't competitive with the costs of water, developing AI, and electricity costs, which were third most important. Um, so maybe an issue. And also, there are certainly issues of noise if a data center is near a housing development. People complain about that a lot, at least publicly. We didn't include that particular item on the questionnaire, though.
Now, in the absence of any action on the part of lawmakers here at the Capitol in this session, which is
Yeah,
for all intents and purposes over,
yeah.
it has fallen to local governments to act on this. Just this week, the Manitowoc County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously for an 18-month moratorium on
Yeah.
new AI data center projects. Do you expect to see more of that?
I do, and I think it's sort of surprising because data centers wasn't at least on my radar much in the spring or early summer of last year, but started to blow up in the late summer and early fall. We first asked about it in October of last year when we found opinion was sort of evenly split. It was 55% thinking the costs outweighed the benefits, but 45% thought the benefits were greater. And there was absolutely no partisan difference in that opinion. Democrats, independents, and Republicans were all at basically 55-45 against data centers. But by February, that had jumped up to this 70-30 split that we saw again in March. And we saw opposition rising among Republicans and independents, not moving by among Republicans in February, but in March, Republican opposition had risen considerably, not quite as much as independents and Democrats, but still well over 60% of Republicans opposed to them. So what you're seeing in political terms is a lot of people opposed to them, and it's bipartisan. And surely that contributes to why you're seeing both Tom Tiffany and the Democratic gubernatorial candidates all expressing varying levels of opposition to data centers. Exactly how much and under what circumstances you might restrict them varies a little bit across the candidates, but clearly candidates for statewide office are paying attention to this. I think the other side is because local zoning commissions or city councils have played a big role in the decisions on data centers, you actually have a situation in which mobilized citizens in a local community can show up and pack the meeting with vocal opponents. And that actually gives them a lot, maybe more leverage than you would have if this were all a state issue in which you had organized groups trying to lobby legislators and the governor rather than showing up with 200 of your friends and neighbors and being really angry at your city councilman or your zoning commission.
And lastly, Charles, I wonder if, given the rapidly changing set of responses that you've got, the increasing concerns over the last several months, is that indicative of folks around the state just thinking, hey, whoa, this is happening way too fast?
I think it is certainly happening fast. We have, by my count, over the weekend, about 55 data centers in operation or proposed around the state. Now, a lot of those are really pretty small things. They're not these mega centers that Microsoft is building and that Meta is either building or proposing. And so we have to be a little careful that we're talking about well less than 55 of these huge centers. But all the attention is focused on the huge centers and what they're doing within communities, whether those benefits are great or small. And therefore, there's a lot of uncertainty about just how will this influence me. But it is striking in our data that it didn't matter for public opinion whether there was a data center in your county or one in your zip code, even to get it really close to home, made absolutely no difference in people's opinions about data centers. So you can be in a part of the state that is 50 miles from the nearest or 100 miles from the nearest data center and be just as opposed to them as if you're down in, the Racine and Kenosha border and you have giant construction projects going on. So it does suggest that people's opposition to them is coming more from a broad worry about data centers, not specifically what they might do to my neighborhood or my community, though certainly that plays a role in individual cases.
Sure. Charles, I have asked everything I wanted to. Anything else relevant on this topic? And I assume that this will continue to be a poll question going forward.
Sure will, because the candidates are responding to them. And, it's getting into the weeds, but, the Republicans tried to pass a bill on data centers in the session, got through the Assembly, died in the Senate. And even that bill had a real problem of figuring out what to say about electric rates. If you remember that debate after the bill passed the Assembly, the regulators said, we don't really know how we could implement what this legislation is calling for. And so I think that shows partly that it's a brand new issue and politicians don't quite know how to deal with it. And given these really lopsided numbers we're seeing at both the state and the national level, politicians, at least here in the state, are opting to be really much more skeptical about data centers than you might normally expect for what could be large economic development projects. The construction industry is very interested in building data centers. And there are a lot of jobs and there are a lot of suppliers that provide parts for those data centers. So there is a real economic impact here. But I'm surprised that I haven't seen more messaging coming from the pro data center side. I look at what politicians are saying and I look at what the sort of usual interest groups are not saying, just being quiet. And I find that surprising, but also one of the reasons that the opponents are winning these arguments, at least locally, is that there's not, at least to my mind, a lot of messaging coming. I went to the WMC website the other day, and in my searching their site, the last thing I could find from them on data centers was from 2022. Now, maybe they're doing a ton of stuff, and I just couldn't find it searching their site. Um, but that's just a concrete example of where you'd think pro development, pro business folks would be much more active, and I'm just not seeing it.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I wonder if now another related issue has been local governments signing non-disclosure
Yes.
arrangements with data center developers. And I wonder if that's kind of part and parcel of this lack of messaging that leads to skepticism on the part of the public as why aren't we hearing more about this?
I think that's a really good point. And we have not asked about the non-disclosure agreements, though I expect we will the next time we run a poll, because it does raise the transparency issue. It presents some of these as, you know, done deals before the public becomes aware of them. So that sort of plays into the hands of the opposition to say, where did this come from and why didn't you seek our input on it? Uh, I don't develop I don't develop data centers myself. Maybe these NDAs are normal business practices for that. But when you're dealing with a potentially highly regulated project for approvals for construction and regulation. Um, some better sense that this is a public relations problem, not just doing a business deal in secret, is really important. And what we're seeing is elected officials, not just here, but around the country, have found themselves in real electoral problems because of the deals that they made. And I'm sure they thought they would be positive deals for the community, only to discover that there's at least broad vocal opposition to them. And again, they're not getting an equal number of vocal proponents for the data centers when they hold these zoning commissions. So you're not seeing teachers groups coming out to say this is how important for funding our local schools and reducing property taxes. This is important for our building trades unions here in the area to build these centers. It's not that those aren't genuine benefits, but they're simply not being talked up nearly as much as the opponents have been successfully talking up all the negatives of the centers.
Sure, sure. Charles Franklin, director of the Marquette University Law School poll, thanks for taking time to talk about this certainly very interesting topic in Wisconsin right now.
Good talking to you, Bob. Thanks.
Take care. Bye now.
Yep.
Okay, stop recording. There we go.